Hey there, I'm Umesh Singh and welcome to Themyscira. It is a land of magic and wonder, worth cherishing in every way. Today we'll be continuing with my in-depth analysis of Wonder Woman. Note that this video series will freely discuss various aspects of the film, some of which could be considered spoilers. So if you don't want any spoilers, then go ahead and watch the film before continuing with this video. You have been warned. Today I'll be covering the iconic diving rescue scene. In the video description, I've linked an analysis video by one of my favorite podcasts. In that video, Samuel Otten presents the JLU podcast team's in-depth analysis of the dialogue and themes of the scene. So definitely check that one out if you've finished watching this video. So instead of rehashing much of the ideas presented in that video, I'll focus this video on things like symbolism and visual storytelling. I'll be analyzing the shots a little bit out of sequence rather than in the order that they're presented in the film. I think this will give me some better narrative flow in terms of my discussion points. So let's dive right in. In this shot, we see Diana approaching a cliff face, from which she'll eventually jump. This mirrors the shot at the beginning of the scene where she raids the Tower of Themyscira. At that cliff, Diana is struggling with the question of, what should I do next? Whereas at this cliff, overlooking the ocean, she struggles with the question of, what did I just do back there on the training ground? As the calming ocean sounds wash over her, she enters a meditative state. This moment of reflection is something that Diana does a number of times throughout this film. For a more detailed discussion, I'll refer you to the JLU podcast episode linked in the video description. Anyway, this quiet moment is interrupted by the buzzing of an airplane, which she sees suddenly crashing through the protective barrier of Themyscira. The crashing object has a person strapped in it, and as it hits the water, she knows she must act to rescue this person. We then have a circular dolly shot, which sweeps around Diana. This is an homage to Lynda Carter's spin transformation. To paraphrase director Patty Jenkins, we couldn't do the spin in the movie, so what we did instead was move the camera around Diana. We'll see a similar sweeping movement in the trench, just before Diana puts on Antiope's tiara, and then as she ascends out of the trench. Now, in the trench there isn't actually enough space to set up a circular dolly track, and so those shots were actually shot handheld, whereas the shot at the top of the ladder, there's obviously enough space to set up a half turn. As Diana dives from the cliff, she takes a swan dive position and then quickly straightens her body into a more aerodynamic shape. In Lynda Carter's Wonder Woman TV show, she also does a swan dive off a pier. Now this dive is the first of many heroic leaps that Diana makes. Once again, I'll refer you to the JLU podcast episode linked in the video description for more details on that. Okay, so now I'm actually going to jump back for a second to lay out the sequence of shots that defines Steve's entry into the film. First, we have Steve in an airplane in a downward trajectory from the top right of frame towards the center of frame. He has lost control. He is powerless to prevent the inevitable crash. He is a victim of circumstance. The plane impacts with the water with an audible splash. Steve is trapped and is frantically trying to free himself. The plane, a machine of war, drags Steve underwater. As he's sinking, Steve looks over his shoulder. He's perhaps looking for a guardian angel or a hero who could save him. Now let's examine what happens near the end of the film. Here, Diana is trapped by the metal track plates from a tank. Ares uses this to pull Diana to the ground. So here, debris of a machine of war is pulling Diana down. Steve once again is in a plane. He ascends diagonally from the center of the frame to the upper right of the frame. Steve is empowered. As the plane is rising, Steve looks over his shoulder. He reflects on his life and he accepts that he is the hero who will end the war. Then the plane explodes. Director Patty Jenkins has stated that in the film, Steve serves as the symbol of humanity.
Through their journey of their relationship, Steve Trevor ends up becoming the person who single-handedly symbolizes everything about mankind.
Viewing the assembly of these shots through that symbolic lens, we can then consider the peril that violence and horrifying weapons places humanity in. War is tragic, not only to the victims of circumstance, but also to the heroes who don't make it home. In Hippolyta's words, war is nothing to hope for. The poetic symmetry of Steve's entry and his exit from Diana's life is utterly breathtaking. Anyway, with Steve's arrival in the story, let's also take a moment to talk about the director's inspiration for Steve. During the credits, you might have noticed the name William T. Jenkins in the acknowledgements. He was Patty Jenkins' father. In the video description, I've linked to an Associated Press interview where Patty alludes to the links between her father and the characterization of Steve Trevor. Just in summary, her father, he was involved in the Vietnam War. He was an American fighter pilot. He was stationed in a foreign country. He had complex thoughts on his role in the war, and he was awarded the Silver Star Medal. So the parallels between Steve Trevor and Patty's father are quite obvious. Coming back to scene 7, as Steve is pulled underwater and he looks over his shoulder, we have this shot of Diana arriving on the floating portion of the fuselage. She's backlit by the sun, giving her a halo, and there are lens flare artifacts around her shoulders resembling wings. The composer Rupert Gregson-Williams appropriately named the accompanying theme music Angel on the Wing. As Steve runs out of breath, Diana plunges into the water, quickly rips Steve free from the sinking wreckage, and swims him up towards the surface. So then here we see an image of Diana literally taking Steve into the light. This represents how Steve's character will be changed by Diana over the course of the film, from a cynical cog in the machinery of war to a symbol of altruism. It also serves as a contrast to Bruce Wayne's line in Batman v Superman, where he said, "In the dream, they took me into the light." We also get a backlit shot of Diana swimming the unconscious Steve across frame. This reminded me of the backlit shot of the unconscious Clark Kent in Man of Steel after the oil rig rescue scene. After Diana gets Steve to the shore, we have this shot. Diana has just saved Steve, she kneels beside him, and Steve is about to recover consciousness. At the end of the beach battle scene, which is just a few minutes away from this moment, we see a similar shot after Antiope has just saved Diana. Diana kneels beside Antiope, and Antiope is about to lose consciousness. This contrasts the idealized heroism that Diana held as a child, the idea that one person can save the day and everything will be better, with the altruistic heroism that is sometimes required when confronting complex real-world problems, that good people sometimes must lay down their lives for the greater good. So lastly, I'll just touch on another aspect of the scene, the Disney princess element that Alan Heinberg injected into the screenplay. At the beginning of the scene, we have an epic dive which can be viewed as a reference to the swan dive from the 1995 film Pocahontas. We should note the differences in context, however, with that dive being playful and somewhat extravagant.
Show off.
While Diana's dive is a necessary and heroic action. Also, the diving rescue is nothing new to Wonder Woman. In fact, in issue number 1 in 1942, we can see that when Steve's plane crashes in the Themyscira waters, Diana and her friend Marla dive off the adjacent cliff and swim to rescue Steve. So this particular diving rescue action has been in Wonder Woman mythos from day one. At the end of the scene, when Steve comes to on the beach, we see a more overt reference to the 1989 film The Little Mermaid. In this shot, however, the sun is not positioned behind Diana's head, so there's no implied halo, as we saw in preceding underwater shots, and no intense flare which would blind Steve. So Steve is therefore able to see Diana's face clearly and opens with his famous first word. So that concludes my thoughts on Wonder Woman's diving rescue scene. Next up is the beach sequence, which starts with a brief exchange between the awakening Steve and Diana, and it goes through to the beach battle scene. Anyway, feel free to leave your thoughts down below, and if you found this video interesting, please like, share and discuss. I hope you'll join me as I delve deeper into Wonder Woman in future episodes. Thank you so much for watching, and always I wish you peace, joy and love.